clock 10:32, so we can make a start. Do we have any apologies?
Thank you, Leader. I have an apology from Councillor Scobie. I have no other apologies. Sorry, Councillor Leaver.
Item 2, declarations of interest. Councillor Dick.
Thanks, Chair. I declare an interest in item 10 as a council advisor on the Dumfries and Galloway Care Trust. However, I don't intend to leave the room during the debate.
Councillor Collins.
Thank you, Leader. Agenda item 8, reference being a member of Swestrang. Again, I don't intend leaving the meeting.
Councillor Geddes.
Likewise, sir, in relation to item number 8, Leader. Thank you.
Councillor Crothers.
The same, please, Leader.
No other hands up. We'll move on now to item 3, minute of meeting of 22nd January 2013. It's here. Is this a correct record? Councillor Crothers.
Sorry, Leader, I forgot my card. Just give me a chance. I've got a query on, I think it's 5.3 for the minute. Chance to get this out. Go back to the. It's 5.3. Go back to the what was said on the day in regards to Councillor Nicholson and McComb, then Dykes and yourself brought up the fact Mr Hazel's making some kind of hand gestures at you, so I wonder if he's trying to give some point of clarity before I go on, Leader.
I think it's just the fact that you're having a touch of the cold, the sort of acoustics aren't that great. If you just be a wee bit clearer so we can hear.
Can't hear me right. Okay, I'll get a bit closer. 5.3 reads to receive a report to a future meeting regarding the implementation of the Council's depot rationalisation programme. The detail of the debate on the day was in regards to Cargan Tower and where we are now. I felt, anyways, where we are now, where we've come from, where we are now, and where we go in the future. And it was yourself that actually emphasised one point on that. I didn't think that described properly the future. We look for a future report, in particular, I felt where we see Cargan Towers in the future. So I wonder if it could have been reflected. And as I say, it was Councillor Nicholson, McComb, Dykes and yourself that actually spoke on that. So I don't know if yourselves have any more better recollection.
Well, my understanding was that we'd asked regards to the funding that had been identified, which was 250,000, was that selling additional land and depots to meet the costs of the rationalisation programme. But I think I also made the statement that we were looking that if in the future it became advisable to look at a different deal for Cargan Towers, that would be something that would be brought back, and I would expect the officers actually to take that on board, that they would take it forward if became advantageous to the council to look at a different tenure, then that would be their job. Councillor Dyke.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I know that I specifically requested information on what the number of depots which had been sold, which ones they were, and how much we'd received from them. And we had an assurance that that would come back as part of the report.
Suppose then, Leader, if we know that type of information will come back and the potential options for us to look at within the report, so long as that's caught, I suppose we've picked up on it here. I don't know if we can get clarity from Mr Hazel just to get some reassurance on that.
Leader, I'm happy to provide the reassurance that the member has sought. In actual fact, members started talking about history and moved on to the future. We have notes of everything that every member said, and we will cover those issues in the report. I can confirm that the report is in the course of preparation. It is quite a task. We are looking at a history going back several years, and we are taking that forward. The report, part of it must be produced by the head of finance, part of it comes from DG First management team, and so on and so forth. But we are producing something which will go back in history give members a snapshot in time as to where they are now, and look at how we go for the future. So that will all be included in the report to members.
If that's captured within the minute as it's written there, happy to agree the minute as is, then, Leader.
Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I did have some queries on the actual, when the decision was taken about Cargan Towers and the rationalisation of properties and the money coming back to Cargan Towers for that depot. What part of my query was, when that decision was made, the scope of what was being spent on Cargan Towers itself, I think, differs greatly now as to when that decision was actually made. So whether another decision should have been made later on for other money on top of that which has been spent out Cargan Towers, or whether it still just keeps selling money from sales of depots to go back into Cargan Towers. So that was part of my query, because I believe that if we'd have known the full implications of the decision at the time, we may have put some qualifications in that.
Mr. Haswell, I think you did mention that all comments were captured and that they would be taken forward and put into the report. With that, are all members happy with the minute? Right, move on to item 4, welfare reform. Mr. Griefson, have you anything to add to the report? Could
come forward. The next table.
One of the guest speaker ones, Richard, here in the front.
Richard.
In the front. Right, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Apologies. Clearly, members well informed in terms of welfare reform. Nothing to add to the reports, Chair and officers. Myself quite happy to answer any questions that members have.
Well, I think this has been causing all members issues across all political groups. I know we, through the working group, have done a lot of work, and there was a paper put forward by the Labour group yesterday which incorporated a lot of our concerns. And I think, as such, what I would like to think that we could actually put forward as a sort of council view would be something in the lines of: note and appreciates the considerable work already undertaken by council staff to mitigate the impacts of welfare reform. Agree to disband the member/officer working group on welfare reform with immediate effect, and establish a subcommittee of Policy and Resources Committee, consisting of 7 members, to make recommendations to Policy and Resources Committee on strategic and policy issues arising from welfare reform. Agree to task that committee, along with all other relevant considerations, with the following: recognising that background work has already been undertaken by the member-officer working group. First one, receive a report to its first meeting on the work of the disbanded member-officer working group. Receive an urgent report on the legal and financial implications of using discretionary housing benefit to cover any shortfall in the first year for those affected by the bedroom tax. Receive a report on what staff resources are currently allocated to welfare reform preparation and on the possibility of establishing a lead staff team. Receive a report mapping out services provided by the voluntary and statutory agencies, for example, food banks, furniture projects, money advice, etc. Receive a report on the mapping of all existing discretionary fund and consider the need to update criteria where appropriate. Receive a report on proposals to expand access to credit unions and to explore other banking options for bad debtors. Receive a report on the extent to which payment or part payment of grants can be done through the provision of goods. Receive a report on the outcome of the Universal Credit Pilot project and consider measures the Council can implement to deal with the digital by default proposals when Universal Credit is introduced in Dumfries and Galloway. Receive a report on the implementation of additional funding for DAGCAS and the extent to which this is sufficient to deal with the additional pressures, particularly in relation to debt advice, and to receive a report on engagement with trade unions with a view to assessing the impact of welfare reform on council staff and potential proposals to support affected employees. Further to that, I agree that the following reports be considered by the Council's Housing Subcommittee, with recommendations reported to the Welfare Reform Subcommittee. The actions being taken by RSLs to facilitate rehousing for those affected by the bedroom tax, including what procedures are in place for cross-housing associations allocations for such tenants, and the extent to which housing associations are preventing placing tenants in receipt of housing benefit in properties which, given their circumstances, are likely to be affected by the bedroom tax. Work on engaging with the region's RSLs to develop a policy commitment not to evict tenants who fall into rent arrears because of the bedroom tax. Review the strategic housing investment plan and consider amending where appropriate to increase the number of smaller units to take into account changing demand patterns caused by the bedroom tax. Receive a report on the potential implications of an amendment to Section 16 of the Housing Scotland Act 2001 to prevent RSLs from using rent arrears caused by under-occupation housing benefit deductions in eviction actions, instead requiring such under-occupation arrears to be pursued as ordinary debt, and to receive a report on the potential arrangements and mechanisms for joint working between the Council and RSLs in relation to welfare reform. Further, agree to adopt the Scottish Government guidance on the Scottish Welfare Fund, published in February 2013, with the Director of Community and Customer Service to implement the guidance from April 2013. Agree that the wider impact of welfare reform is included in relevant reports to service committees and to the Welfare Reform Subcommittee. Agree that the Chief Executive have a remit with powers to ensure that welfare reform is a priority for the Council's corporate management team, ensuring that a member of CMT has the authority across all Council departments to lead the preparations for welfare reform. Agree to support the unanimous decision of COSLA and write to the Scottish Government to request that it matches the Welsh Government's commitment to fund in full for future years the shortfall caused by the 10% cut in funding for the Council tax reduction. Agree to apply the policy development funding for welfare reform other impact alleviation measures of $262,000 contained in the Council budget 2013-14 to top up the Council's DWP funded discretionary housing payments allowance for 2013-14 of $232,000, giving a total fund of $494,000. Agree to delegate to the Director of Community and Customer Services to allocate the full discretionary housing payments budget of $494,000 in accordance with the current DWP guidance. And lastly, agree to write formally to the Under-Secretary of State for Works and Pensions, Lord Freud, detailing the detrimental effect direct payments and the bedroom tax will have on the residents of Dumfries and Galloway, and the subsequent pressures these will place on council budgets, and that, as a minimum, the under-occupancy regulations be amended to give 2 bedrooms as the minimum rather than 1 bedroom. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to ask you to repeat that, but no. Just one thing, and my apologies. And I know you had the kindness to offer discussions with us on this and on our paper. There's one thing that I've just realised that, if possible, we maybe want to add in is to agree to work with partner organisations to develop a Dumfries and Galloway-wide communication strategy to increase awareness of the changes and to direct the public to where they can receive assistance. I don't know if would that be okay?
I do know that the department has written out, and I think was it all people I think affected by the bedroom tax and I think we should actually look to make sure that across all agencies we are giving the best information. So I'd be happy to include that within the motion.
Thank you very much. And you know, we do welcome the fact that the administration have adopted the proposals in full, and I've great pleasure in seconding the leader's motion. I think it's important now that we do have a discussion on how we actually got to this point, you know, for information. So I'm happy to second your motion.
Councillor Collins.
No, I'm very pleased to see the council adopting this motion. I think this is an extremely important issue that's recognised clearly by all elected members as a growing pressure, and we need to keep our fingers on the pulses of what's happening to the people and residents of Dumfries and Galloway as we go forward, and I believe that this gives us a means of doing that.
Councillor Smith.
Thanks very much, Leader. And I think, like Councillor Nicholson, I welcome the fact the administration's fully adopted all the proposals from the Labour Group, and I think that's I think it is encouraging and refreshing to see that there is a clear consensus and a way forward on an issue through the council. Over the last few months, the Labour Group's working group has carried out a great deal of work speaking to housing associations, advice agencies, health professionals, in fact, and the impact it's had on them. And most importantly, we spoke to a lot of people who are going to be affected by the welfare reform changes. I think one of the clear messages that we've been given, and it's reflected in the report that was handed out to members yesterday, is that the council does need to play far more of a leadership role, both politically and from a senior management route in terms of welfare reform. This is obviously the first report we've really had on welfare reform, even though we've known this has been coming for some time. It's common practice in other authorities that they have reports on welfare reform on a more regular basis, and I think we need to do that as well. I think some of the messages that we've been given over the last few months is not only the need to play more of a leadership role, but the fact that there's actually quite a significant amount of excellent work being done by the staff of this council to prepare for welfare reform. It's a huge task for everybody, and that work, though, is actually being carried out over and above the work that they're having to do on a daily basis from their existing tasks. And I think that's one of the messages that we've put in our report, and I'm pleased that that's been picked up, that we do need to look at the resources that we allocate in terms of welfare reform. A few other key points that was certainly raised and is missing from the report, but is obviously included in the recommendations, is the need to bring forward proposals for credit unions. Obviously, the issue of direct payments and payments into people's bank accounts was one that was flagged up by a number of organisations to the Labour Group. And while we have a process that will commission more resources, hopefully, to credit unions from 2014, the Labour Group view was quite strong that is too late, that we need to actually bring forward that report as quickly as we possibly can. The major impact of the bedroom tax was flagged up by numerous organisations and is an issue of huge concern to the Labour Group and others, and how that's going to affect us. And the feeling that we had, and certainly the evidence we took in our working group, was that we aren't really as prepared for that as we should be, that housing associations are talking about how they're going to try to allocate people who ask to move into smaller properties, but it wasn't clear to us that they actually had put in place the structures to do that on a cross-housing association basis, and we really need to get more information on that. As a council, we obviously need to review our own housing policy to make sure that we actually have the properties in place, because there simply won't be sufficient number of one-bedroom, two-bedroom properties in place. I very much welcome the one additional recommendation that the administration have came up with, which is to lobby the UK government over some of these particular changes. I think that we'll all share the view that the UK government has got this wrong when it comes to the bedroom tax, that it will penalise people, and I'm pleased that the leader and others have put aside politics to actually raise this direct with the government, and we have to send a clear message that the bedroom tax is going to impact on communities in this area, and they need to change their policy on that particular issue. I won't go through all the 21 recommendations the Labour Group put forward. There's one final one I would flag up, though, and that's when it comes to support for advice agencies. Now, obviously, the administration did put additional funding over the next 2 years towards DAGCAS. We obviously objected to the fact that you had removed funding from welfare rights, and also we objected to the fact that you had removed funding from adult education as well. But I think we do need to keep that closely monitored, that the additional funding is welcome. However, that will go towards maybe the extra pressures when it comes to more benefits applications and more appeals. What it doesn't really take into account, and this was a clear message that we were given, is the additional support that's needed for people that are likely to go into debt as a result of the welfare reform changes. That will put significant extra pressure on advice agencies right across the region, and we need to keep that monitored to make sure that we're putting the resources in there to support as many families as possible. But as I say, very much welcome the fact that the Labour Group's proposal have been adopted in full, and we've got a real consensus and a way forward here.
Councillor Dick.
Thanks, Chair. Very much welcome the consensus too. I think it recognises all the concerns that clearly everyone in this room has, and I think it would be appropriate to thank the Labour Group for the work they put into that document. It was certainly comprehensive and very useful. Just to confirm, I think on the financial summary, we're recognising that we have assigned in total about 1.6 million to looking at welfare reforms and the mitigation, and that's certainly a reasonable start.
Councillor Maitland.
Oh, well, let me rain on your parade slightly, shall I? I was given this 10 minutes ago, so I have not, I think, had a proper chance to look at it very carefully. However, I, along with members right across the political spectrum, apart from the Labour Party, have been working for the last year on the working group, and so none of this comes as any great surprise to me to see this here. Those of us who have been on the working group know that there is a communication strategy already in place and being worked upon now, and they will also know that we spent a very great deal of time talking about credit unions and how we would be able to assist that. In fact, out of that working group came the suggestion that there should be assistance given to work up using credit unions more actively. So I can assure members that that has already been dealt with and thought about and would have come through quite naturally in the course of the report to this committee from the working group. The thing that you haven't got in here, since we're picking bits and pieces out of the working group's activities, is financial education. It was made clear in the last working group meeting that we wished to make an emphasis upon the Council's financial education and to make sure that that was not lost in the course of this particular sort of work, and actually should be one of the strands that is taken forward quite carefully. I'm quite surprised that in your final paragraph here that you're going to write to the Under-Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, Lord Freud, bearing in mind actually that we do not know what the impact is going to be, the effect is going to be. I don't know. I haven't got a piece of paper here which is going to tell me precisely what's going to happen. So I'm quite astonished. What are the terms that we're going to write to?
Well, my understanding, there was the seminar last week highlighted that there were issues, the people who would be affected, the cost that would be to them, and what we are saying is that as a region, we have taken a decision that we look at building houses with 2 bedrooms as a minimum. Now, that means that there will be an impact if 1 bedroom is the actual limit that we go for. And that's why we've asked for him to consider the fact that we have in the past built to 2, because rural areas are, I would say, different from urban areas where you could look at maybe 1 being the base because you're in a small area, you have better transport links. In Dumfries and Galloway, if Granny and Grandpa are babysitting and need to stay over, it's 60 miles maybe to Stranraer from somebody's house, and you're looking at the transport links there after a certain hour not being in place. So I think we have to look at it from the rural fact that it is a different situation. Right. So, Councillor, just one other thing. The one thing that gave me comfort when reading through both documents and the work that I've been informed of from the working group is that both match quite well. So I thought that one backs the other one up, so I thought that was a good point to actually come out of the both systems if both groups have came up with similar recommendations. Councillor Dykes.
Thank you, Chair. I would also like to reiterate my thanks to the working group on welfare reform. I am not on that group, but I did find the seminar which took place last week, being led by the Council, was particularly informative and very useful to me. I would also like to put on record the fact that I am very pleased today to see in this chamber that people are putting politics aside to actually do what's best for the people of Dumfries and Galloway, because that, in my opinion, is what we should be doing. So I would just like to thank everybody for that.
I think Councillor Crothers, was it Councillor Smith, I think that indicated.
Just to pick up on your point, I think for the seminar we had for Lorna last week, something like 256,000 units in Dumfries and Galloway would be moved from out of bedroom tax, and around 1,300 odd would be moved from 25% down to 14% of their benefit being taken back. So I mean, it's a major implications for this area.
Colin, I think it was your hand.
I just echo the comments that Councillor Crothers said. I mean, I think that if we think for a second that there's no evidence out there that people will be impacted by the bedroom tax, then we've not really been following this issue closely. I mean, I suppose the slight difference between the work the Labour Group's been doing and the work that Councillor Maitland's been doing is we've been going out there and actually speaking face to face with all the housing associations, with advice agencies, with a number of groups, and they're all giving us a clear message that as things currently stand, there will be a major impact as a result of the bedroom tax, and we can't hide that particular fact. And I do welcome the fact that we are going to lobby the government over this particular issue. We've had cases raised with us. Simple one, for example, a family who has somebody in the armed forces. You know, their son is out there fighting for this country, and when they come home, there is no bedroom for them under the bedroom tax. Where a family spoke to us about that are separated now, and they've got joint custody of their kids, but only the person that gets child benefit would actually be entitled to housing benefit, you know, because they live separately. So the other partner will not be entitled to housing benefit, and they will have to move to a one-bedroom property. So I think that, you know, there are new, and I could go through numerous cases about carers, about families who, for medical reasons, that a married couple may not be able to share the same bedroom for medical reasons, and they actually need an extra bedroom. All these examples that we've had flagged up to us, there's huge amounts of evidence out there that the bedroom tax will impact significantly in this area, and we'd be completely in denial if we said otherwise. So I very much welcome the addition at the end. In relation to the communication strategy, the point that the Labour Group are making in this issue is that recently we, along with the local MP, there was a welfare reform summit held with a number of local organisations. I'm pleased the council came along to support that and actually give a presentation to the various groups that attended that particular summit. What surprised me was that the original aim of the summit was to discuss how we could work together to try to mitigate some of the welfare reform proposals, but actually it turned into a bit of a question and answer session as to what these proposals actually mean. There was numerous organisations across the region who deal with people on a daily basis who will be impacted by welfare reform, but they didn't actually have the full information and the full facts as to what welfare reform actually meant. They were genuinely asking questions about how the housing benefit change would work, etc. There is a huge gap in the level of information that's out there in the community, and we've got an important role to play as a council to actually lead on that, to make sure that the partner organisations we work with actually have that information. The group met with a number of GPs locally, and they were taken aback by the fact that there's been a huge increase in some of their workload, because obviously people are losing disability benefits. They're having to appeal now. They're having to go to their doctor to ask for letters of support. They're going to the doctor because their condition has deteriorated. And a lot of GPs out there in the health service locally certainly weren't sort of fully aware of what the implications could be for the health service of welfare reform. So there is a real need for the council to take a lead when it comes to communicating with the public and with organisations that we work with what this is actually going to mean for the residents in this area. So I think communication and increasing that is absolutely crucial.
Councillor Nicholl.
Thanks, Leader. I think it was Councillor Maitland that mentioned financial education, and I think this is very important that we educate people on how to prioritise their finances, because with the direct payment system and people getting their money directly into their banks, they might not always prioritise it towards their rental. They may have other priorities which they wish to put it to. So I think financial education and encouraging people to prioritise properly is very important. So I would hope that the officers will be taking that into consideration when they're talking to the people.
I'm just wondering if that could be included with regard to the remit of the chief exec to get someone in charge, and we incorporate that they actually take that forward for financial education across the CMT to make sure that we have the right people in place for the right jobs.
I think that would be a very good idea, Leader.
With that, are members happy to agree with the proposal, with the addition that the understanding is that the financial education is taken in under the chief executive's remit to ensure that that actually happens, and agree to work with partner organisations to develop a DG-wide communication strategy to increase awareness of the changes and to direct the public to where they can receive assistance. Happy with that? Right. Move on to item 5, change fund bid, additional procurement resource. Mr. Haswell.
Thanks, Leader. This is an application for funding from the Corporate Change Fund to enable us to beef up, for want of a better term, our corporate team in terms of procurement. Members will see from the report that the CES Refocusing Review Programme did identify not a weakness but a benefit from having further dedicated resource available. Obviously, we would make sure that these people, if members agree, would be appropriately qualified. I think at the moment we're looking to look very closely at how services procure the various services and goods that they get to ensure that we get maximum value for money, and at a time when we're trying to achieve savings, this is very important. I think on that basis the bid does meet the change fund criterion. We have historically ascertained that the savings of twice staff costs can be obtained. So if we increase, even if we look at the bare minimum, if we spend 114, we would expect to save that again, at least. The only other area I would say is I see this as a spend to save. So again, I've looked at the change fund criteria. I hope that members will agree with me that it does meet the criteria and that we're able to take it forward.
Councillor Dick.
Yeah, very much welcome this report there. It's move the recommendations. This was the identification, I think, during the budgetary process that this is an area which could reap considerable savings without having to touch our services. What was quite clear is that we pay out a fortune for the way in which we procure and purchase and buy things. And I think the final sentence of 3.1 really says it all. For me, the key driver of our policy objectives for the local economy and support the delivery of savings. We're doing two things. We're making the council more efficient, and secondly, we're supporting our local business, and I very much welcome this.
Councillor Geddes.
Let me say, Leader, that I agree entirely with Councillor Dick's sentiments. To you, if I may be permitted to use the colloquialism, to me it's a no-brainer, and I would have much pleasure in seconding his motion.
Councillor Dykes and Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you. More than happy to support this. It's something that I've been talking about for the last 5 to 6 years. I think it's very important, and we do have an opportunity to spend to save. And if we've got appropriately trained personnel, either able to be trained or brought in as already being trained, I think that that will be a major benefit to both the council and our local area.
Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you. I do welcome the support again, and I like the emphasis on local suppliers. I think that is important. One of the things is that, for the change fund bid, is the delivery of these savings, and is there any way that we can get a report back on the actual impact, actual savings, that's actually on an ongoing basis?
Yes, sir, I would include that in my monitoring report to members, if that were acceptable to members. And hopefully we would be bringing forward month-on-month identification. For the first couple of months, we'll obviously be looking at how people do go about their procurement. We'll have to go out and check that that's correct and then find alternative methods. But yes, I will report back the savings as they accrue.
Councillor Lever.
Just on that, could we not broaden this out, because we are being asked to invest in a number of spend to save options? Could we not just look at the spend to save generally in terms of how effective it's been?
I'm happy to take that away and look at it, sir. Yes.
Councillor Crothers.
Thanks, Leader. Delighted to support this. Just to make sure that someone gets some confidence that this is a one-off hit, to make sure that's sustainable. I wouldn't like to think we're supporting something that I know there's confidence within the report, just to make sure we get that reassurance, because I think this is very important to be supported.
I think I'm comfortable to give that assurance, sir. We're looking at year-on-year savings here. This is something that we're going to make sustainable. Obviously, as times get harder, there will be other areas where we can look, but certainly it seems there's a considerable benefit available here by allowing the team to go in and look at how all services are procuring. I think there's a service which spends £14 million on supplies and services. If we can't get a better deal than that, and during that, there's something wrong.
Just with regard to the qualifications, now is that a legal qualification in procurement, or will we also be looking at qualifications in actual purchasing?
I think there are a range of qualifications. I would prefer if members didn't tie us down to a legal qualification or a purchasing qualification. I think if you get the right people who are able to be trained up, and I think Councillor Dykes mentioned that, we will be looking in the first instance at internal recruitment, because there may be people available internally who have got a history of purchasing, buying on behalf of the services. So we'd certainly be looking at that in the first instance. So if I say to members that there will be an appropriate qualification, I would prefer, if you don't mind, not to be tied down to a specific qualification or specific qualifications. Some very good people don't have any qualifications if they've been in the job for 25 years.
I take heart from the fact that there'll be a range across them. That gives me confidence. Councillor Dick.
Yeah, I'm just pleased to hear Mr Haswell give us that assurance. I think one of the things I found rather concerning during the budgetary process was we were given to understand that only 20% of our procurement goes through the Council's recognised procuring system, and yet two directorates were telling us that both of them used that system fully, which seems to suggest that the piece of work that Mr Haswell's suggesting is that they go around the Council and find out exactly how people are operating is absolutely essential.
Councillor Geddes. Councillor Dyke.
Just to take on board what Mr Haswell said, as long as the person is capable of doing the job, that I think is what's necessary here.
With that, we have the recommendations. Anyone otherwise minded? Item 6, use of the Corporate Change Fund. Gillian, are you taking us through this one today? Is there anything you want to add to the report?
Just to say that this report is basically seeking the agreement of the funding allocations that have already been scrutinised through the service committees, and each of the allocations are detailed on section 5.1, and the reports from the previous service committees are attached as appendices. Thank you.
Any questions? Councillor Nicholson?
It's just a comment. I think Councillor Leader maybe made mention of it as well, about the actual change fund itself and how it is being used. I mean, I'm quite happy for these projects to go forward, but it does bring into question about the change fund in itself. When you get statements from DG First, for example, this project is not intended to directly deliver cashable savings. You know, if there are, it was my understanding that change fund would be used for monetary savings as well, but you know, I do understand the intricacies of the care and support services and what's being put forward here, but I think it does bring into question some of the change fund and what it's used for.
Comment on that. I know that it was maybe efficiency savings rather than cashable savings, but anything further you'd like to say? Mr Garrett?
Obviously, this is a discussion we've had through a number of committees. I think there is a need for the Council to identify an amount out with unallocated balances to support change and efficiency going forward, given some of the challenges that the council are facing. So I would like to continue to support the change fund approach. On that particular reference to DG First, I think what they're saying there is that it's not the prime reason, but they are anticipating making savings through this measure. We've been in consultation with the Director of DG First and the Head of Service, and they're anticipating making savings against the home care budget through this investment.
Thank you. It's maybe the language used in the report. The project is not intended to directly deliver cash flow.
Councillor McClung.
Yeah, thanks, Leader. My second point is connected with the last one. However, my first point is when this was first brought to P&R on the 4th of December, the request was for 154,000, and then, sorry, this is the Appendix 1, which is the Care and Support Service. The request was for 154,000, and then when it went to DG First Management meeting on the 13th, some 9 days later, the request was for 120,000. It's nice that we can lose 34,000 roughly in 9 days. And in connection with the point that's already been made, on the original P&R committee on the 4th, it was said that there would be savings. However, now we're saying that there may be savings.
I think the original figure for the Care and Home Support Services allocation was based on an estimate as to how they would, what the staff level would be. They've actually fully costed that now, and the figures came down to 120,000. I think in the first report we'd said that they would achieve savings because we generally feel that they will achieve savings. It's just that they're not quantifiable. We've got indications from, as Paul said, from the head of service that there will be savings against the home care budget, but obviously as the budget moves on a daily basis, depending on client needs, we can't put a specific figure down on it, so it'll be subject to monitoring throughout the year.
Councillor Crothers.
Excuse me. Thanks, Leader. It was to pick up on the same point as Councillor Nicholson has picked up on. Similar on the back of that is on page 96 at the top, where it says that this project is not intended to directly deliver cashable savings, and it may see future savings. And we're talking about potentially be efficiencies there, but I would have thought, I kind of waved that from my own perspective when I seen this, because I thought surely it's an improvement of service we'll see as well. So I'd just like some confidence that we'd see an improvement of service. So on the back of seeing that, then it should even be demonstrable that we should kind of be happy to agree with.
Yes, absolutely. It's a combination, really, in terms of improvements to service, efficiencies in the service. And as Gillian said, we are anticipating identifying specific savings through this proposal as well. Just we haven't been able to quantify them at this stage, but we'll monitor that as the year progresses.
Councillor Geddes.
Thanks, Leader. It's page 93, sir, paragraph 4.1. It's a statement made there which I find somewhat intriguing. DG First is leading the way with the integration of health and social care in Dumfries and Galloway. Now, let me make it clear to you, I'm a total supporter of the concept of integrating health and social care in Dumfries and Galloway, but DG First, from my perspective, are the deliverer. Should that not be driven by the commissioners?
Chief Executive.
Well, that's actually, excuse me, what that's actually referring to is the joint working with the NHS, and one of the key things we've got here is where we have changed the balance of representation and management from the NHS to the council, because we have a better skill set in organising to deliver. So what they've managed to do there is actually not only that change the skill mix being applied by the NHS to the project through that joint working driven by staff. So what they've developed there is a model of joint delivery that would then feed back into the consideration of the Commissioner and the Council and its health and social care. That it's actually not driven by the grade of staff, but the skill set that they bring in. So that's actually, it probably should have been expanded in there. That's actually what it's referring to, as we've changed the management from a reliance on NHS managers to a council and more frontline support.
Can I say, Leader, I'm suitably reassured and I'm grateful for the explanation. Thank you.
Councillor Smith. Councillor McCaughtrey.
Yeah, I think the point raised by Councillor Geddes highlights something perhaps need to address when we look at delegation to committees, etc. I think the whole client-contractor thing was set up 20-odd years ago was there to address a certain problem. Time has moved on, and I think in this day and age, we'd certainly make it more efficient if we did away with the whole client-contractor basis. Because it seems to me that, particularly at certain committees, there's a lot of argument goes on about is this the client role, is that the contractor role? And really, I don't think there is a need in this day and age to have that separation. And I think it would make us a more efficient organisation if we did away with it.
My understanding is we're working towards that under commissioning and delivery. It's maybe something that needs to be pushed along in certain services to actually get down to the actual commissioning framework, and that's how it should be delivered rather than the possible old way of client contractor one. Councillor Geddes.
I was just to say, sir, that I, with the greatest of respect to Tom, I fundamentally disagree with the comments he's made. I'll leave it at that.
With that, we're asked to agree the allocations which have been scrutinised by the relevant service committees totalling 685 as detailed in section 5.1. Are we agreeing? And to note that an estimated balance of 317,000 remains available to support the delivery of savings, change and efficiencies in the future. Noted. Move on to item 7. Council Revenue Budget Monitoring 2012-13 for the period ended 31st December 2012. Mr. Garrett.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the overall corporate revenue budget monitoring position, the overall position is very much in line with that previously reported to members. And general services are making good progress towards ensuring a balanced outturn position by the end of the current financial year. There is a concern or risk regarding potential overspending in social work. However, this was the subject of a report to last week's meeting of the Social Work Services Committee, and there's further work required that we're doing in conjunction with the Social Work Services Management Team at the minute to seek to contain spending in the current financial year, and also to seek to ensure that work that's currently being undertaken is appropriately aligned to available funding streams. The other key issue that's reflected in this report is the potential allocation of the corporate contingency budget. An issue has arisen during the course of the year relating to what's known as ordinary residence, which relates to the responsibility, including financial responsibility, for the care costs of people who are looked after out with their own local authority area. Recent legal rulings have meant that some English authorities have been seeking repayment of care costs from previous years from the Council for people that are currently cared for within Dumfries and Galloway. There will be a detailed report on this issue to the next meeting of both the Social Work Services Committee and to this committee, and at this stage it's recommended that we need to retain the corporate contingency budget of £350,000 to offset the net cost of that issue when that comes forward. The recommendations in the report are for noting, Chair, but happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Councillor Dick.
Yeah, just to, I think, appropriately recognise the work that the Finance Department, Paul and his staff have done on the loan charges. I think that's an excellent way of saving, and just wondered whether you anticipate that we will be able to take advantage of the low rate of debt and debt management in the future and come up with further savings.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Yes, as we reported to full council in December as part of budget setting, we've actually identified that there would be an underspend or an availability of £1.5 million within the draft budget in terms of loan charges. So that's been allocated for the upcoming financial year as part of the budget proposals to support planned preventative maintenance measures, again, as we did in the current financial year. So we're benefiting from the continuation of the low interest rate levels at the minute.
Councillor Smith.
Thanks, Leader. Hopefully in the next item, the historically low interest rates will be something that people will take into account when it comes to how we invest in roads, but we'll come to that in a second. I want to touch on the social services overspend. Obviously, that's gone from £500,000 projections now to £760,000. There was obviously quite a detailed debate about this at Social Services Committee last week. I won't go into any detail as to what happened there, but one of the issues that concerned me, and certainly was raised within the external auditor's report, was the way in which we actually set the budget as a council, and I think it was highlighted in social services, effectively all we do when it comes to the forthcoming year is we take the historic figure for spending and we simply uprate it. Or if there's cuts, then we cut a chunk out of it, basically. And it's not just social services that does that, it's actually every department. Now, the reality is social services have been hit because they're a particular demand-led service, and therefore, when it comes to changes between one spending line and another, they're more susceptible to problems. But the reality is, my reading of the external auditor's report is that could happen to just about any department in the council if there are fluctuations in service provision, because we don't, and I've raised this point time after time after time, that we spend all our time debating the £7 million worth of cuts, and we spend absolutely no time discussing the £300 million expenditure of the council. It simply happens that we get a report to a committee saying this is the budget for the year ahead, and it's rubber stamped within 5 minutes, and that's really just not the way we should be doing the budget. We did put forward a proposal at the full council meeting in February. Sadly, it was ignored by everyone, that we actually had to start the budget setting process for the year ahead that day. As soon as we've agreed this year's budget, we have to move on to the next year's budget. And frankly, I've absolutely no idea what the timetable is for this council to set the budget for the following year, because we don't have any arrangements in place, because that whole issue that was raised by the Labour group at the full council meeting was completely ignored by other groups. We really need to take a look again at how we actually set our budget, and it starts with how we agree the budget for the forthcoming year by department. And I just hope that other groups will listen and actually look at that issue all over again.
From memory, I might be wrong, but my understanding was that was brought forward at the Social Work Committee, that we look at future, how we set the budget, and it was actually incorporated in the recommendations. So that should come through the appropriate committees at the appropriate time. Support the full council coming in that one. Right. Councillor Geddes.
Yes, sir, it's in relation to paragraph 4.3 of the report. Mr. Garrett's already alluded to it. My question would be, it's twofold actually. At what level in the legal hierarchy were these rulings reached? First question. And second question is, are these appealable?
Thank you, Chairman. This appears to be an agreement which has been reached between governments, between the Scottish Government and the UK Government, which applies English law in Scotland. I have taken, or I'm in the course of taking, an opinion at the very highest level. I won't name the name, Mr. Geddes will know him well, just to ascertain exactly where we are. Our own legal services department are working on this, but we are taking advice from the highest level. I think part of the report that may come back to the committee would be to the effect that you should be making representations to the government about it, rather than trying to go through a legal process. But certainly, the matter only came to the attention of legal services a couple of months ago. There has been some preliminary work done on just to scope where we are, but I can assure Councillor Geddes that we'll get the best legal advice possible.
Follow up?
Yeah, yes, indeed, sir. I'm grateful for the reassurance. I would perhaps quibble slightly with Mr. Haswell. I think it might be more effective at the end of the day to take the issue to the judiciary rather than perhaps to quote, the late Sheriff Principal Johnson, mere politicians or mere civil servants.
Councillor Crothers.
Thanks, Leader. On the back of the last question, that's what I noted myself. Is there any positive implications in regards to this? This is about residents staying in homes, then become resident in Dumfries and Galloway. Is there an effect where people go across border? Again, is there a positive side to this or not? How does this work?
One would like to have thought it was swings and roundabouts, but the way the document is written, it is not swings and roundabouts. And Dumfries and Galloway, obviously, because we are in the area of the border, are probably the worst affected local authority. We have good quality care services and we are close to the border. It is not a reciprocal thing, sir. I think that's the question you're asking me, and the advice I'm getting at the moment is it is not a reciprocal thing. It's a one-way traffic.
Just as a quick follow-up, Leader, that's even more reason to reiterate, taking this to the strongest point we possibly can.
If there's no further questions, if we turn to the recommendations for noting, 2.1 and 2.2, members happy to note. Move on to item 8, Corporate Capital Programme Monitoring Report for the period ended 31st of December 2012. Mr. Garrett, have you anything to add to the report?
Thanks, Chair. Just briefly again, in terms of the monitoring position, while the overall forecast is reasonable in that we're anticipating 97.5% of the approved budget will be spent, it is important to recognise that there remains slippage on specific projects, and the appendices to the report attempt to provide a summary of the reasons for that slippage, although the detail is presented to relevant service committees. Perhaps the key issue reflected in the report was the availability of budget consequentials funding, which has now been confirmed by the Scottish Government, and the amount available is £1.89 million, as identified at paragraph 5.2 of your papers, which is in line with the amounts indicated to members during the budget setting process. Full Council has already agreed that £1 million of that amount should be allocated to support roads works, leaving £890,000 available for allocation. This money needs to be allocated to projects that are out with the existing agreed capital programme and that will be completed by the end of March next year. So what the report asks is for members to provide direction to officers in terms of where they would like to see that money spent, and we'll come back to members with more detail on what is deliverable at the next meeting of this committee. Happy to answer any questions, Chair. Thanks.
Councillor Dick.
Yeah, thanks. Before we come to the capital spend, which is pretty good news, can I refer to 3.6 and ask what steps have been taken to ensure that any works in the future have accurate estimates and comply with Scottish building standards?
I think this is a specific issue. I think that there has been a degree of uncertainty regarding the nature and timing of works in the Community Workshops programme. It was indicative estimates that were informing the projections previously. Further work undertaken has identified that there needed to be other things put in place to ensure that we did meet building standards. So it's something that we're taking on board. It's been discussed with the Capital Investment Strategy Group to try and ensure that the forecasts going forward are more accurate.
Councillor Geddes.
It's said, or what I'm about to say, sir, to use the old Scotch saying, it's said, half fun and hail earnest. It's paragraph 5.5, remaining £890,000. Well, I could give you a project, sir, which would be deliverable by 31st of March 2014, bearing in mind that we own the relevant land. It would be much appreciated in Mid-Galloway, and I'm talking about a 3G pitch, but I've no doubt other members would have similar views to express in their respective wards.
Councillor Dyke.
Well, on the back of what Councillor Geddes had said, I mean, I'm sure everybody in this chamber would have a pet project that they could put forward themselves. However, I do think that we should be looking at possibly moving some money into land-based projects, which would cover a whole raft of things, including parks, 3G pitches, etc. And then some proposals could be worked up and brought back to us.
Councillor Lever.
Page 121 of 144. It's disappointing to read about the slippage in the Burns statue project yet again. I mean, I was probably one of the few people who knew about the consultation which took place at Greyfriars Church, and one of the major points that the officers there made was that they're actually going to do the work during the very quiet time for the retail sector, i.e. between February and May. This is now going to go right across the summer tourism season, cause a great deal of disruption at the top of the high street. I mean, I don't think it's acceptable that once again we've got slippage, and I guess some of it's to do with the shipping of the granite from China. We had this problem in Friars Vennel when they were repaving the Vennel. That went on far longer than projected due to supply problems. Perhaps we should learn the lesson of not relying upon cheap granite coming from abroad when we could possibly source it at home.
Mr. Green.
Thank you. I absolutely understand the concerns, and whilst in an ideal world we would have taken forward the project out with that period, we have been cut out slightly in terms of the delivery of materials. The one thing we will be ensuring, though, is we have a very strong communications plan so that retailers, residents, visitors all know what we're doing. We'll have some very strong visual representations on the site so people can see what's coming, and with a fair wind, the good weather in the summer will help the project move forward very quickly.
Follow up, yeah.
Well, just in terms of communication, I didn't know anything about the slippage until I read this document beginning of this week, that there's been slippage at that sort of length of time. I don't know if the other retailers know about this. Have they been informed?
I think through the retail association we'll have had a discussion with them, but what we're planning to do is we have a communications plan to go out to talk to all the retailers from a specific timetable and specific detail on the exact nature of the works and the timetable for the works on Burn Square. We've engaged with the retailers previously as part of consultation, so they're very well aware of the project, and we said we'll be going back when we have the detail confirmed. So we will be doing that in due course.
Councillor Geddes.
I was just going back to Councillor Lever's reference to cheap granite being imported from China. I mean, I can remember one of the first issues I got involved in, post-election in 1999. It was the self-same problem of cheap granite being imported from China for the erection of the Scottish Parliament building in Edinburgh. So it's obviously an issue which goes back a considerable length of time.
If there's no other questions, Councillor Smith.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was an unfortunate phrase from you in saying with fair weather, we'll stay on track, given the fact that obviously the winter in China has caused the delay in getting this granite over here, and I think it's been made, the point being made by Jeff, this has happened before with the Venal, and it's happening again this time, and we don't seem to be learning the lessons from this. I want to look though at in terms of the allocation. We've obviously got £890,000 over and above the £1 million that's already been allocated to roads, and I've heard a kind of mention of a 3G pitch as one allocation. I mean, it's very much the view of the Labour group that the priority of this funding should go towards economic development projects. We've had numerous debates over the last few months about a number of projects, Stranraer Waterfront being one of them, and one of the issues over the Stranraer Waterfront has been the fact that it is insufficient funding to actually meet the demands and the various projects that we'd like to support there. And it seems to me that bringing forward some of those projects is certainly one thing to look at as far as that additional £890,000 is concerned. There are other projects as well in terms of the priority economic development projects, such as the White Sands Master Plan. I think one of the fears that we have is that when it comes to taking forward the master plan and taking forward the learning town projects, all the pressures on the capital budget are going to come at the same time over that 2 or 3 year period. And if there's any way we can actually bring forward some of those particular projects, I'm going to give you an example in terms of the White Sands. We're going to remove an awful lot of car parking places along the White Sands. Can the council put in place some of the additional car parking before that work happens using some of this particular funding? So I think there are numerous economic development projects that could be taken forward using this additional £890,000, and I think that should be the priority. I suppose there are a couple of ways you can look at it. You can either receive a report once all the different service committees set out their proposals for capital, because I understand they'll have reserve projects, and then look at those reserve projects to see if any of them can be used for the £890,000, or we can simply allocate that funding to, and I think Councillor Dyke said land projects. The Labour Group position would be it should go towards economic development projects. We're also concerned about the allocation of funding still towards the issue of roads. It is the single biggest issue that is raised by the public, and that's the condition of our roads right across the region. Frankly, I've never seen them as bad. You know, 4 surgeries last night, 80% of the problems raised were pothole issues and the condition of road surfaces. And I still maintain that we should be investing more into our roads, and that's why I'm be happy to move that over and above the £1 million that's been allocated in the budget, that we should allocate an additional £1 million for each of the next 3 years. And if that requires additional borrowing, then so be it. But we should be putting more investment to tackle our roads problems. Frankly, I don't believe it will require additional borrowing. We've already seen that we're considerably underspent in terms of our loan charges, so we can afford additional borrowing. But the reality is we always come towards the end of the year where there is slippage, and I don't believe that we'll actually need to borrow the additional £1 million each of the next 3 years, but there's certainly scope to do that. So I would happily move that we do allocate an additional £1 million over the next 3 years, for each of the next 3 years, to be allocated towards infrastructure to deal with road repairs.
Councillor McComb.
Just going back to Burns Statue Square, it's unfortunate that a region so rich in granite resources has to go halfway around the world to source the granite for the square. And a second wee point, I would like to think that the planting of the trees will not be obscuring the view of the statue. It would seem a bit pointless to surround the statue with trees so that no one can actually see it.
I take it that the trees that you would be planting in the square will be appropriate so that they're not going to be big beeches or something. Councillor Maitland.
Thanks. One of the grandest squares in London, Sloane Square, is filled with trees and buses. I just wanted to make mention that while I sympathise with the idea of economic development, the team came to Stewardship Area Committee and told us about the £98,000 which we had allocated as an area committee. Very modest sum, admittedly a one-off sum, but you know that 28 jobs had flowed basically from that. I think Councillor Collins is nodding in remembrance at that. So for very modest outlay, you can get people to match funding and make a really good effect. And so I am appreciative that economic development is important, but it doesn't have to be done simply about laying granite slabs. I am delighted to tussle with Councillor Geddes over the 3G pitch. I think it's a very splendid idea. All we're going to argue about is where it's going to go. It's very easy for people to talk about not needing these things, these assets, but that's fine if you've already got one. And those of us between Stranraer and Dumfries don't have one. And I think we'd probably quite like one. And indeed, I think I'm being pointed out Upper Nithsdale hasn't got one either. So I think if the administration is proposing to suggest that the £890,000 is put into a pot for that to be then discussed, I would be very happy to go along with that as an idea.
Councillor Carson.
I'd like to second Councillor Dyke's suggestion that the full amount of the money goes to land-based projects, and these projects are worked up for consideration.
Are there any issues in any of the requests so far that have caused you concern or you would like?
I think what we're looking for is to give that indication of which asset class you'd like to add this £890,000 to. What we'll be doing is on the back of this direction, coming back to you in March. I think it's absolutely essential that we come back to you to tell you what can genuinely be deliverable by the end of next year. And I recall that in the report put to October, Policy and Resources Committee, when you agreed the overall asset classes, to talk about that there wasn't a need to allocate additional funding to economic development asset class at that stage because of the funding that's already approved in the programme, and potentially what you'd be doing would be adding to slippage by doing that. I think that could still be a concern, but if that's what the members want us to develop, we could come back and tell members in more detail what could be achieved at that next meeting.
Well, I think we have a motion and amendment.
Just to clarify in terms of guidance, there is obviously no concern at all in terms of allocating additional £1 million to tackle the roadworks issues we've got, though, is there?
That was what I was looking at. It was the fact that should we have a further report to clarify that, because we don't have the information in front of us just now as to cost implication set. We know it's about 70,000 per million per year. It would maybe be better if actually incorporated the request into a future report so that we could have a fully informed report in front of us. Mr. Garrett?
Yeah, the report asks members to consider the allocation of £890,000 that's available next year. Are you talking about potentially exceeding that amount and wanting something brought back on that? I'm not sure if that's the committee's intention at this stage.
Can I maybe clarify for you, Chairman? You have two different proposals before you. I'm not sure and convinced that they're opposing proposals. What you have is a motion by Councillor Smith, seconded by Councillor Nicholson, that this council allocates an additional £1 million each year over the next 3 financial years for roads maintenance and repairs. You then have a proposal by Councillor Dykes, seconded by Councillor Carson, that the additional £0.89 million be considered for allocation on land-based projects, parks, 3G pitches, etc., and that officers bring back a report to the next meeting to allow members to consider that. So I'm not convinced, Chairman, I know there's no direct negative in the Council standing order. I'm not directly convinced that you might want to vote one against the other on this occasion. But I'll take your advice, sir.
I've maybe misunderstood Councillor Smith. I thought he was wanting some or all of the 890,000 to go to economic projects.
I think it's 890,000 rather than 8.9 million. If it is 8.9 million, that makes it a wee bit easier. But it's £890,000 to economic development projects, and in addition to that, to allocate an extra £1 million for each of the next 3 financial years. So it would be clear that's 13, 14, 15, 16, 16, 17 towards road improvements. So it was the £1 million is in addition, and if that requires additional borrowing, so be it. But you know that's a revenue cost for the forthcoming year, the next year, not this forthcoming year, because obviously you pay the costs after you've borrowed the money. And I don't believe that we will need to borrow the money, but that's a debate we can have. But I mean, we have to set up clearly that we've got to invest in. We've got £100 million backlog in our road repairs, and we really need to start to invest significant sums if we're going to catch up on that.
For clarity, Councillor Dykes and then Councillor Geddes.
I'm just questioning the competency of £1 million for the next 3 years when it's not anything that's on our papers. We've been asked to allocate £890,000 and to which class that we want to spend that on. I'm sorry, but I personally don't think that's competent to look to spend additional money when we're not being asked to do so with no information in front of us.
Councillor Geddes.
Well, so that's my point entirely. I accept what Councillor Smith is saying. I've been one of those that's been arguing consistently for well over a year now, you know, that we do that. I would love to support it, but I'm certainly not prepared to support it today because I simply don't have the information in front of me to let me really know what the implications for other projects would be. What my understanding is that we're being asked to deal with in this report today is the issue of the £890,000. And notwithstanding my pseudo-facetious remarks earlier, let me say for the record that I agree entirely with what's being proposed, i.e. the split between the £700,000 and the £190,000. But I am more than willing to look again, you know, to use Mr. Haswell's comments, I'm more than willing to look again on the basis of proper information at the appropriate future time about the possibility of pumping yet more investment into a roads network in Dumfries and Galloway.
Councillor Smith.
But I can spot a get-out when I can see one, and people can use as many excuses as they like not to make a decision, but the reality is because you've been asked to spend £890,000 doesn't mean to say you're not capable of actually making other decisions on the same day. The £1 million is actually additional borrowing if we require it, and we won't know until the end of the year whether we do actually require it, and that's what happens every single time you allocate funding towards capital projects. You don't know till the end of the year whether you're going to have slippage and how much you're actually going to borrow at the end of the year. But this is £1 million over and above the full information that's already contained within the paper. I can remind members that Social Services last week, you managed to pluck out of the air a proposal that said, let's bring in outside support and professional help. I didn't see anything in that report saying where the money was going to come from there, but you still managed to support that particular recommendation at the time. So, you know, it seems to be one rule for one committee and another rule for another committee. Let's be absolutely clear, this is £1 million extra for each of the next 3 years, additional borrowing if required. The information is contained within there. It tells you exactly how much we currently borrow and how much we actually spend in the capital project. The projection is, if you bother to read the budget papers that were put forward by the Labour group in February, the projection is that the loan charges to borrow £1 million is £70,000. So the information is, it's £70,000 is the cost to borrow £1 million. You've had the information time after time after time, and you know we really need to start making decisions here. You can all sit and talk about being concerned about the state of our roads, but you actually need to start doing something about it. And that's the appeal that Labour Group's got, to actually put forward the investment that we need to actually tackle some of these particular problems. You've had the information before, and it really is about time people stop making excuses not to actually invest in our roads.
Councillor McClung.
Yeah. We can also spot somebody trying to bring in a budget by the back door. That's exactly what was claimed in the budget. So we're being asked to allocate the £890,000 here. No go back and look at previous proposals in the budget.
Councillor Dick.
Just on the subject of roads, I think we allocated £250,000 to buy proper equipment which would improve the quality of our repairs and patching, so that it wouldn't need the regularity of repair that it has done in the past. In addition to that, my understanding is that in the previous financial year, we spent or allocated over 14 million to roads, to all sections of it, and the capital structural allocation has doubled in the last 10 years. In addition to which, I think this administration had promised to allocate 10 million minimum in each of the next 5 years. Well, at the moment, as I understand it, we're 4 million over that, and we've just put another million into it. The other question about throwing another million in each of 3 years is the deliverability, because on the allocation of a million, or the request to allocate 3 million, sometime I think in the last council we were told that by DG First they couldn't deliver it. So we've got to be absolutely certain that it's possible to actually do the road repairs before we actually go throwing money at it. It's a question of deliverability as well as resources.
Councillor Crothers.
2 points, please. Leader, if I can get the first, did the amendment came forward from Councillor Dyke, seconded by Councillor Carson. Was that moving the whole recommendations with a steer on the 890k on the back of that? When I get the answer to that, can I come back in, please? Was that the whole recommendations? Maybe the move needs to.
Councillor Dyke.
890,000 to land-based projects to be worked up and brought back to this committee for decision.
And were you moving the rest of the recommendations and along with that? Yep. Okay, well, I mean, I'll definitely be supporting that. I wouldn't question the competency of Councillor Smith's motion. I think it is competent after what I've heard. But again, after what Councillor Dick, we did get reassurances that we'll struggle to resource the extra funding if it was put in place at the time. But that's something else we'd have to come back to, Leader.
I'm sorry, but I don't have the information in my report in front of me here to make any decision on what Councillor Smith suggested. That doesn't mean to say I agree or disagree with what his suggestion is. The information's not in front of me. I can't make that decision. Hence the reason I don't think it's competent.
I actually think we have in the past. We know what the revenue consequences are of investing $1 million. That's why I was trying to guide Councillor Smith to actually incorporate in a future report the actual spend, rather than actually agreeing it today, rather than divide on this. But Councillor Smith is keen on sticking with today's one. I think I have concerns over it, but I think we do know that it's £70,000 a year. Councillor Geddes.
Well, and how are you going to address the perfectly valid points that Councillor Dick has raised about capability and capacity to deliver? We haven't, we're not in a position to, to ascertain that. That's my point, primarily, in addition to the resourcing issue.
When the administration allocated £1 million in the budget in February, was it contained within the report whether that was competent and whether that could be managed within DG First? Because I don't actually recall that being contained within the report.
I do know that prior to going forward, it was made sure that it was deliverable through the templates, etc. Right. I think because of the fact we don't have that information in front of us today, I'll give you a chance to actually say you would like to move for a report coming back on it if you wish. But currently, I don't think it's competent because the information isn't in front of us today.
There's two questions there, whether or not, I mean, the problem is I'm hearing conflicting arguments here. I'm hearing arguments for Councillor Dick that basically says we're spending far too much on our roads already. And I'm hearing arguments from other councillors who, well, with all due respect, they seem to list a whole pile of we're going to allocate £10 million, but suddenly we're spending £40 million. We're doing incredibly well. He needs to look at the potholes in his ward to see how well we're actually doing. But the reality is that if you are prepared to agree in principle this allocation subject to a report on the achievability and the revenue costs, which we already know, but others obviously want more information on. But if you're prepared to agree that in principle, subject to those two reports, then I'd be happy to amend it to say that. It's whether or not we think there's sufficient money being spent on investing in our roads. I don't think there is. I think it's perfectly affordable to increase that to an additional £1 million over the next 3 years. It sets out clearly to DG First what their budget will be for the next 3 years instead of the sort of ad hoc way we seem to do it on a year-on-year basis. And I think if people are prepared to agree that in principle, then they should do so. It's subject to these additional reports coming before the committee.
Ready to vote, Mr. Haswell.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just clarify with Councillor Smith and Nicholson? I'm sorry, I didn't tie up the two issues of the 890k being spent on economic development projects and the motion that came forward. I think the motion is now that the Council agrees in principle to allocate an additional £1 million each year over the next 3 financial years on roads maintenance and repairs, subject to a report back on the deliverability and implications of that decision. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah. And just to be clear, in terms of the other area where there obviously is a difference in terms of economic development versus land projects, the wording is that agreed to allocate the remaining £890,000 to economic development priority projects, and obviously that would require a report to Planning, House and Environment Services on those projects, obviously highlighting Stranraer Waterfront, Dumfries White Sands Master Plan and the Corridor Regeneration Strategy projects. That's the priority projects.
Can I have clarification of the motion again, sir? I didn't quite pick up what Mr. Haswell was saying in relation to sort of the latter part when he was endeavouring to in his summation of Councillor Smith's proposal.
Can I say to Councillor Smith, have you got your motion written down, sir? Because it's you made a considerable statement, which I have noted down. It related to priority projects. It related to economic development priority projects. But when you moved the motion related to roads, sir, I'm not being awkward with you, but I think, Chairman, if Councillor Smith is putting forward a motion of quite importance for this council, I think it would do well to get it in writing. Chairman, far be it from me, but if Councillor Smith wishes a short period within which to do that, I don't know if the motion is written down, sir.
It is indeed written down. I'm happy to make copies if you want to break for a minute while I do that. It's not a problem.
Chair, could I ask that you consider a recess to allow us to look at it?
12:15. We're all sat down. Started again. Councillor Dick.
Thanks, Chair. Could I just ask Mr. Garrett a question just in relation to any allocations to economic development? There's quite evident from an earlier report there's quite a bit of slippage in this area. And there appears a considerable underspend. Could you confirm, Paul, just how much is currently available to economic development?
Yeah, in the report put to Policy and Resources Committee in October indicated that there was already considerable funding within the agreed programme for economic development projects, including £2.4 million for Stranraer Waterfront regeneration and a further £1 million for the Dock Park regeneration project. In addition to that, there's slippage from the current financial year, as we've just gone through, amounting to about £1.4 million. So there's already significant funding available for economic development next year.
If I could just come back here, thanks for that. So essentially, we've been asked to come up with shovel-ready projects that are deliverable within the next current year. And on the back of that, are we likely to be able to use another 890 million through economic development? And that's the question that raises with me. 90,000, sorry.
I think it's indicated in the earlier discussion. I think that would be a concern that potentially would be adding to slippage. Obviously, we could come back with further details on that, but that would certainly be a concern.
Mr. Haswell, I think you have a motion and amendment before you now.
Yes. Does Councillor Smith wish to address the committee?
I do. Well, given the fact that obviously Councillor Dick's allowed to ask questions on the Labour Group proposal, then I would have thought that the Labour Group might be able to ask questions on it. Can I ask, I mean, obviously, I haven't rehearsed this like Councillor Dick has, but can I ask whether or not Paul and others have seen the report that went to Planning, House and Environment Services on the Stranraer Waterfront project in January, which set out a large number of projects that were classed as short-term delivery 2013 to 2015, that ranged from about £20,000 right through to 1.1 million for a slipway. Has that report been seen? Because obviously Planning, House and Environment Services were confident there was a range of projects that could be invested in Stranraer Waterfront, and the big debate was simply around the fact we didn't have enough money to allocate to the projects we would have liked to have allocated to, rather than whether or not they were deliverable.
Mr. Garrett.
I'm certainly not aware of the detail in terms of that project, and to be fair, it wasn't really brought into those previous comments. But I think one issue is that, particularly in terms of economic development projects, we need to make sure that whatever is agreed, we can actually translate into deliverable projects next year, because this money has to be spent by the end of March 2014. So I think it's important that whatever we do agree, we ensure that it's actually something that can be delivered next year.
Mr. Haswell.
Can I just remind members, you have a motion by Councillor Smith, seconded by Councillor Nicholson. Have all members got a copy of this? Yes. So I don't need to read it. It's basically item 8, agree recommendations 2.1 and 2.2. 2.3, note the availability of the additional 1.89 million, of which 1 million has been allocated for roadworks, allocated the balance of 890,000 to economic development priority projects, receive a report on how to prioritise this funding at Planning, Housing and Environment Services, focusing on economic regeneration priority projects at Stranraer, Dumfries and Corres, and the last part of it is to agree in principle to allocate in addition an extra 1 million for each of the next 3 years, 13-14, 14-15 and 16-17 on roadworks through additional borrowing, if required, subject to reports on deliverability. The amendment by Councillor Dyke, seconded by Councillor Carson, which I understand remains unchanged from the original amendment put forward, and that is that the committee receives a report on the allocation of the £890,000 to the land asset category, and for projects to be worked up and brought back to this committee for approval. So our members, sorry, I did miss that. Councillor Dykes in our amendment also accepted recommendations 2.1 and 2.2 in the report. Are you ready to proceed to the vote, Leader?
There's obviously no mention of any roads in the amendment, no.
I think we're ready to go to the vote.
Thank you, Leader. Leader.
Amendment.
Deputy Leader. Councillor Crothers.
Amendment.
Councillor Carson.
Amendment.
Councillor Dick.
Amendment.
Councillor Dykes. Councillor Geddes. Councillor Lever.
Motion.
Councillor McGregor. Councillor Maitland.
Amendment.
Councillor Marshall is not present. Councillor McCaughtrey. Sorry, Councillor McCaughtrey. Thank you. Councillor McClung.
Amendment.
Councillor McComb.
Amendment.
Councillor Nicholson.
Motion.
Councillor Nicholl.
Amendment.
Councillor Smith.
Motion.
The amendment is carried by 12 votes to 4.
Move on to item 9, living wage. And Mr. Clarkin with us? Does that one have a card in it, Mr. Clarkin? Yeah, right. We have the report in front of us. Is there anything you wish to add at this stage, Mr. Clarkin?
Chair, I think most of it's in the report.
Over for questions. Councillor Smith.
It's obviously slightly disappointing it's taken us since December 2011 to get to a stage where we're not proposing anything. What seems to have been missing from the report is that, well, there seems to be an acknowledgement of the challenges faced with embedding the living wage. I would like to see further information brought to this committee on the 5 local authorities that have embedded the living wage, exactly how they've done it, because it's not impossible. And secondly, there seems to have been no progress at all when it comes to actually paying the living wage for overtime. It seems bizarre that we agree in principle that nobody should earn less than £7.50 an hour, except if they're doing overtime. It's a kind of bizarre contradiction, if you ask me. So we should have a report back on the implications for ensuring that we pay the living wage for overtime as well as for normal working hours as well. I'd like to see the 2 pieces of information brought back to this committee as soon as possible.
Councillor Nicholson and Councillor Maitland.
If that's a proposal from Councillor Smith, I'm quite happy to second that. I think it is, it's frankly a disgrace in this council. It's taken 2 years to get nothing. No report back on how to embed it, and that was the very first thing that we asked for. 2 years on, we're no further forward, and a report on how the other councils have managed that would be helpful in taking us forward, and a report on the embedding the overtime rates, which is a basic rate, basic thing to do, will be welcomed by us, the Labour Group anyway.
Councillor Maitland.
I suggest you agree the recommendations as they stand.
The motion amendment. Vote.
Thanks, Leader. The motion is by Councillor Smith, seconded by Councillor Nicholson, and that is that, noting the terms of the report, this committee seeks a further report detailing information on the 5 local authorities who have already embedded the living wage into their pay structure, and also as to why the living wage has not been embedded into the overtime payments payable to staff who receive the living wage during their normal working hours. Is that an interpretation? Is that correct, Councillor Smith? Thank you. The amendment by Councillor Maitland, seconded by Councillor McGregor, is that the recommendations detailed in the report at 21, 22, 23 and 24 be adopted. Are you ready to proceed to the vote, Leader?
Point of clarification, Councillor Nicholson.
Just one thing, Councillor Smith put that forward as it's an information event. You can add that to the recommendations if you want. I don't understand why this committee would be against finding out information as to how the 5 councils have embedded it, in their practices, and how they embed the overtime rates, and how we might learn lessons from that.
Move on amend, second amendment, want to change the amendment?
No, I'm happy to leave it as it stands.
Are you now ready to proceed to the vote,
yes,
Leader? Leader.
Amendment.
Deputy Leader. Amendment. Councillor Crothers.
Amendment.
Councillor Carson. Councillor Dick.
Amendment.
Councillor Dykes. Not present. Sorry. Councillor Geddes. Councillor Lever.
Motion.
Councillor McGregor. Councillor Maitland.
Amendment.
Councillor McCaughtrey. Councillor McClung.
Amendment.
Councillor McComb.
Amendment.
Councillor Nicholson.
Motion.
Councillor Nicholl.
Amendment.
Councillor Smith. The amendment is carried by 11 votes to 4.
Move on to item 10, third sector funding. I think it's a follow-up to the report we had on the 4th of December. Mr. Hay, have you anything to add to your report?
Thanks, Leader. Other than to say this is simply to look at what committee is best placed to make the decision in terms of the level of funding to be awarded to this organisation. Happy to take any questions.
Councillor McCaughey.
Well, I think you're making an assumption here that the Nithsdale Area Committee is in a position to fund this. This morning on the e-agenda, I just got the papers for the Area Committee for next week, and it's got discretionary budgets there for 2013-14. And just at a quick glance through them, the budget has been cut by almost 33,000 to 542,000. The things that have already been agreed and ring-fenced amount to 216,000. There's 18 applications received by the 11th of January, totaling 296,000. A further 2 received by the 15th of February, totaling 59,000. If all these were paid out in full, that would result in 355,000, which is actually more than the allocation we've got. So at the moment, Nithsdale has no money if all these existing grants are paid out. So at the end of the day, if you refer this to Nithsdale, you might as well say you're shutting it down. I think you need far more information on this particular item, because I don't think Nithsdale Area Committee is in a position to pay. It has not got the money.
Councillor Dick.
Could I just ask for a point of information before I say anything else? Was I understand that where projects have been deemed to be local rather than regional, that an allocation of central money was sent to the area committees where that was the case? The one that springs to mind over from our area, the Westfest, for example, which traditionally was paid from the centre. But under the under this new way of allocating it, there is money from the centre following these applications.
Leader, that's correct, sir. What Policy and Resources Committee agreed in 2011 was that where there was projects or applications that were deemed to be of a single area nature, that it would be best placed for the area committee to consider that application, and as such additional budget was given to each area committee to reflect that additional remit. So there's obviously a number of applications that are now being considered by all 4 area committees that previously would have been funded by this area committee, by this committee, that's now needing to be considered by the respective area committee.
Thanks, Chair. Looking at 3.3 there, I was absolutely astonished when I read the statement that the social work services had advised that the services delivered by this organisation do not directly contribute to social work services priorities in relation to disabled people. I cannot, for the life of me, understand that statement, and I'd make that point at the outset. Ideally, I would have liked to have seen this funded from the centre for rolled over for another year on the basis, and I can fully understand that if projects are being deemed to be localised, where the rationale comes from, so long as the money follows it to some extent, I don't care who pays it. But ideally here, I think this group, the Care Trust, has made an effort to try and move itself across the region, and I would like to have seen social services providing them with some kind of assistance. Indeed, I actually would like to see them giving them some assistance to start spreading the kind of service that they provide in Dumfries across to Stranraer, Newton, Stewart, Castle, Douglas, Sannon, so that it is truly a region-wide, and then bring it back into the centre. So I would like that assurance anyway that social services will recognise what this does for disabled people and give every assistance in order to move this out across and get some kind of assurance about the funding. I hear what Councillor McCaughey is saying, but my understanding was that we were actually sending money over there, which I maybe mistakenly understood might have been ring-fenced for a local project, But can I have some kind of clarification or assurance that that will be available at the area committee if this committee decides that's where it has to go?
Thanks, Leader. Certainly, as Councillor McCosker has already outlined, Nisdale Area Committee meet next week to consider a number of discretionary budget applications. And what I can confirm is that the group have been proactive to look at other funding routes, and as a result have put an application into Nisdale Area Committee that has been through the scoring process, and members of that scoring panel have come up with a recommendation for Nisdale Area Committee. As always, it's simply a recommendation, and if members of that committee wish to allocate less or more than the recommended amount, that's absolutely within their remit to do it. So the resources available to Nisdale Area Committee and the range of applications that have been submitted have all been factored into the recommendation in relation to the Dumfries and Galloway Care Trust application. Thanks, Leader.
Councillor Smith.
I have to say I'm a wee bit confused by Councillor Dick's argument that money should follow the service, and that's correct. Money did follow it, but not for this particular service. When services were transferred to area committees, money did follow, but what's being proposed here today is that the service should go to Nisdale Area Committee, but there should be no additional allocation to Nisdale Area Committee to fund it. So the funding is not following the service. What actually is happening is that we're being asked to simply put this money effectively in the bank for future projects. So it's not even as if we're having to make this savings in order to balance the budget. We're actually simply allocating the money for something else that's currently unspecified. So I think we have to be clear that the money is not following Nisdale Area Committee when it comes to this particular project. I mean, I agree with Councillor Dick that I think that the best way forward is that we roll this over until next year and look at it in light of additional information. What we asked for today was actually information on the number of users by each of the area committee areas. And obviously we haven't got that because the organisation doesn't hold that particular information. And what we have here is figures for the number of registered users. Now that's not the same as what we asked for. We specifically asked for information on who actually uses it, and we haven't got that particular information. So I have difficulty actually making a decision based on the information I have in front of me. What I'm also concerned about is that the figures we have in front of us aren't accurate. The information for Nisdale, for example, includes Dalbeattie, registered users in Dalbeattie. Now, the last time I checked, Dalbeattie wasn't within Nisdale, and I think we do need to look at this report again. I'm not clear it's competent in the sense that the actual figures are not accurate, because, as I say, it does include figures for Dalbeattie, and that isn't part of Nisdale, so it does give a sort of false figure saying that 61% of registered users are within the Nisdale area. And I don't think that's accurate, and we need to look at that again. And it isn't what we asked for. I think that the ideal scenario is that we roll this over for one further year. We actually ask the organisation to assess the number of people who use the service from each of the areas, and then that will give us a definitive answer to the question that we actually raised last month as to where most users are. I think I'd be also right in saying that there are other projects that are in the remit of this committee that, if you were to carry out a similar assessment, you would discover that the users were in a particular geographical area. I mean, just look at the budget for last year. You've got projects like the furniture project in Stranraer, you've got Galloway Youth Project. These things are not, if you like, region-wide projects, but they're contained within this department's budget, and it does seem a bit unfair that we're actually singling out one project in this particular case. But I'm not confident that we have the information in the report today that we actually asked for, and I don't believe that the information that we have today is actually accurate. I think the other thing that we don't have in the report is the knock-on effect to other projects that actually are supported by this particular project, and that information is not contained within the report today. So I would certainly share Councillor Dick's concerns over this. I think that the funding is already there. It's not as if we're actually having to make a savings this year. The funding's actually there, that we actually roll this over for 1 year and we actually gather the information that we asked for.
Councillor Maitland.
Well, you won't be surprised to hear, Leader, that I disagree. People have talked about the issue of area committee funding. Indeed, that was the case. All area committee funding has been cut. All area committees are going to have to make shoehorn services which are pertinent to people in their area into their priorities. And that is the significant word. It's about prioritisation. Certainly, people from other parts of the region go and shop in the regional capital, and that's a very good thing, a really good thing, and it's good it should happen. Given that the way that we have arranged these funds and these services to be considered, it's up to each area to decide whether or not they are going to prioritise this particular service with respect to their area. I point out to members that it's not that social work services don't probably approve of an excellent service being provided. They're simply saying that in terms of priority, it's not their top priority, which it isn't. So I leave it, I think, as is, and I would go with recommendations, and I say propose.
Councillor Lever.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I agree with Councillor Smith. I mean, we've been asked to make a decision which we don't have sufficient information. I mean, the number of people registered isn't the same as the number of people using it. I mean, I'm registered to use concessionary transport on the buses, but I never use the buses. So I think we do need to have further information in terms of the number of people from particular areas who are using these facilities. After all, there are 1,450 registered clients, and there are between 2,400 and 3,000 users a year. That works out at 2 per client. I would imagine, well, I would have thought that there's actually a record kept of who uses these scooters, even in terms of insurance, etc. And I think we need to draw down on that additional information. So I agree. I think we should roll this over for a year and get further information, because as Councillor McCauley is pointing out, this is a very significant part of the Ministerial Area Committee we're asking them to commit at this stage.
Councillor McGregor.
Councillor Maitland made the points I would have made. Thank you.
Councillor Carson.
Thank you, Chair. Again, Councillor Maitland probably covered most of the points. It's very well Councillor McCauley saying that they've no money left. I think that's the role of the area committees, is actually to prioritise the funding, and they're in a far better position to do it than full council of this committee. I don't think it's a great step into the dark to estimate or guesstimate that the people who benefit most from this service are people who are in this Dale region. And that's not only the disabled people, but also the shops and the businesses in Dumfries that benefit. So that, I don't think we need a further report. It would be very surprising, if not unbelievable, that it's not the people in this still actually benefit from this.
Councillor Crothers.
Leader, I was akin to what Councillor Dick was here. I thought it was a straight way forward. Certainly wasn't a motion put forward at that point, but felt me in line to what he was saying. I thought he brought up some valid points. It might sit centrally, but it covers the whole of Dumfries and Galloway. That's clear within the report. I think social work services could play a greater role. That's my own personal point of view, but I'll leave it at that and see what it goes.
Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Chair. I think what's not been taken into consideration, yes, the area committee does have discretion over its funding, but this is a limited pot of funding where this is actually an additional organisation that would then be adding into that burden, if you want. So therefore other ones that would have to suffer. So there won't be an understanding need for budgets, area committee being on a prioritised basis, but this is an additional source which effectively is a region-wide resource. If you think about it, the 57% of the registered users are from this deal. That means 43% aren't. In addition, what people don't seem to be taking into consideration is there are tour buses that come into Dumfries and then go out throughout Galloway. Now, I know what happened in here, that when the funding was cut to the shop mobility in here, the 40% of tourists, there was 40% less tourist buses went into here because they couldn't access the shop mobility stream that was there because of funding cuts. They then went on to somewhere else. Now, people come into Dumfries in tour buses and they go to Dumfries, then they go to Kirkcudbright, they go to elsewhere in Galloway. And I think that is a region-wide resource. There's 7% people in Sederunt use it, 7% Kirkcudbright, 6% Cars Douglas, 5% Lockaway, 9% Annan, and 5% in Moffat. These people, if there's no access to the shop mobility, I reckon that they will stop coming in, stop shopping, stop doing everything else, but have less access to resources, which is obviously very important to them in getting out and about. I think part of the reason we're wanting a report back is because of the lack of information. This committee actually asked for information that about the users, about the individuals who use these journeys and where they come from, and we haven't actually got that information. In fact, an officer wrote back, but, you know, they haven't got that accurate information, and I think we'll just have to go with the info we've got for this report. So therefore, that isn't a very a suitable situation. And Councillor Smith pointed out, for example, that Dalbeattie is in with Nistdale, which isn't true. So I think on that basis, I don't understand why there's this big opposition for an organisation, that respected organisation that provides a valuable service. And another thing, it provides a valuable service, but it's not an unrelated service to others. Like they have under the Care Trust a forestry and gardening section, which you know, gets people with less ability out and about and work in that. Now they share a service for cost reasons, and one is interrelated to the other. Now, if there was less funding for the shop mobility, then that would then put in danger the forestry and gardening part of that, because, I'm sorry, maybe Councillor Maitland wants to come in there. I don't know. You know, so that then puts that organisation in danger as well. So on the basis that we haven't got proper information that we actually asked for, and inaccurate information as well, provided in the report, I don't see any reason why we can't roll forward this for another year until we glean all that information and make a proper informed decision, as we were some councillors very keen to get in one of the other reports.
Got 2 second time speakers. Councillor McCaughey.
I think it's a lack of not only is a lack of information here, but why should Nistdale pay the whole cost? There's other areas where Nistdale picks up the entire tab for things. There are obviously services that help the entire region and people out with the region. We're not complaining about that. If that budget had been allocated to Nistdale, as things have been done in previous years, I wouldn't have a problem with that. If that had followed along with other things that had gone in last year. Again, pro rata, as Councillor Smith points out, that if you take away Dalbeattie from that 61%, you're down to 57%. 43% of people who use it are coming from the other areas. And I think next week the Nistdale Area Committee will be quite right to say, we'll fund 57%, we expect you to make an application to another district for their share of the payment. Because that's what happens in the case of other organisations that provide a regional service. You know, you can't have your cake and eat it. And I think because of the lack of information, the money is there, pay it for another year and get a far more in-depth survey done. Because I rather suspect, when I see folk coming off the buses in the White Sands who are disabled, I assume they go there. I see them later on today scooting about in these scooters. I assume they go there so the people from out with the region utilising the service as well. And I think it's been totally unfair on Nistdale, who've already had their budget cut by over 5%, to impose something that would take up almost 10% of their budget for next year without any warning, without any notice. And the big danger is if you do that, the outcome is going to be that this service is going to be diminished. And it's going to be diminished at the end of the day when the money is still here in the centre to pay for it for one more year.
Councillor Dick.
Could I just ask a number of questions regarding the funding through your chair to Mr. Hay? Can you just advise what the funding application was, what the recommendation will be to allocate from Nistdale Area Committee, what reserves the organisation hold, and the amount that was transferred from the centre to the Nistdale Area Committee, whether or not that can actually be ring-fenced specifically for this group. Just on the allocation, whatever the request for funding was, can you advise the connection between that and the Care Trust's other activities with the forestry and gardening?
Thanks, Leader. Yeah, my understanding is that the project applied for the same level of funding to Nisdale Area Committee as they received this financial year via this committee, which is £51,663. The recommendation of the scoring panel, I've got to stress it's simply a recommendation to Nisdale Area Committee, is that the project is awarded £36,286, and according to our records, the organisation have got reserves of £70,549. I just also want to reassure members that this decision was clearly deferred at P&R Committee in December, purely on the basis of whether it was a project that had a wide enough regional significance or not. And I can assure members that the project were very well aware of what type of information members needed to make an informed decision. The information in this report is what the organisation advised us they were able to provide us. If they'd given us more detailed information, it would have been included.
Chair, if you could indulge me a follow-up. What assistance could be given to shop Motability about rolling out the region-wide? Is there any practical assistance that can be given to identify locations and where they may be able to provide that service to make them truly and extensively a region-wide service?
Thanks, Leader. As mentioned in the report, that the lead service for this project is social work services, and I think it's already been mentioned that they recognise the importance and the value of this project, but it's simply not featured in the commissions they're currently developing at this moment in time. I would imagine that if there is the potential for this organisation to look at a wider remit across Dumfries and Galloway, then the necessary officer support could be identified to try and look at that business model. But as things stand, members can simply consider the information that's in front of them this morning, Leader.
Right. Two final speakers. Councillor Lever.
Thanks, Chair. I still don't think we've got sufficient information on which to make a decision. At the end of the day, the money is actually there, the 51,663, and the suggestion is it be retained in reserve to enhance the commissioning process, whatever that means. Therefore, it could easily be rolled over to a following year. I mean, we're very late in this financial year to pass this on to the Nisdale Area Committee. And the question is, what happens if Nisdale Area Committee refuses to fully fund this? I think Mr. Hay said that the recommendation is for 36,000, which is about 2/3 of what they're getting at the moment. They may decide either to fund it to a lesser extent or not to fund it at all. And then what happens to the whole scheme?
Councillor Geddes.
Well, going back to the point that Councillor Dick made, sir, about liking to see this, or hoping to see this rolled out as a regional-wide service, I would certainly agree with that. But we are where we are. The service, basically, at the moment, as I understand it, operates in relation to Dumfries. Now, I'm somewhat surprised that the organisation have not made application, as it were, to the other three area committees for some degree of funding, because I think in the interests of equity, Leader, if there are 7% of the people from Wiganshire, for want of a better term, making use of the service, I, as a member of the Wigan Area Committee, though I'm nowhere in that particular bonnet today, would not feel it inequitable for us to be asked, as it were, to put our hand in our pocket as an area committee and make a contribution based on that information to the operation of the service. I think that's only fair and just and equitable. And I do have a certain degree of concern with Nisdale being asked to meet the full 100%, when that table there clearly shows that there is a breakdown and that people from other three districts in Dumfries and Galloway are benefiting. So while I can't commit the Wigan Area Committee, I would hope so that it might not necessarily be too late at this moment in time for this organisation to make, in fact, an application based on that figure as it were, and presumably by extension doing the same to the other two area committees. I think, as I say, that would be, in my view anyway, you know, if there are people from my part of the world benefiting from this service, I don't think it's unreasonable to expect our area committee to endeavour to afford that a degree of priority and to fund that proportionately.
Colin, do you want to make your point and I'll let Harry answer the point?
I think it's a bit unfair to criticise the organisation for making an application on this area committee, given the fact that it was officers of this council that advised them to do so. And obviously what we're being told today is that the same officers are recommending that the budget be cut from 51,000 to 36,000. So I mean, that is, with the best will in the world, the minimum that's going to happen if this goes to Nithsdale Area Committee. I raised the issue earlier that the information we have today is not accurate. It's not accurate to say that 61% of registered users are from Nithsdale. That report's wrong. I made that point earlier. Dalbeattie is included in those figures, and Dalbeattie is not in Nithsdale. You know, so the information we have is inaccurate, and it's also not what we asked for. And to be fair to the organisation, they don't collect daily uses in terms of people's addresses. You know, when they go in to actually use this facility, you know, they don't register every single day. It's just the overall registered users, so they can't provide information that they don't actually have. And, you know, we've put that burden on them, and they simply can't provide that. So I mean, I have a lot of sympathy with what Councillor Geddes is saying. It seems to me a perfectly reasonable way forward. You know, there is not sufficient funds based on the report that goes to Nithsdale Area Committee next month to fund the full 51,000, and officers accept that. So we're actually being asked today to cut a service, and simply it's not true to say that this will be picked up by Nithsdale next month, and they should be given a time to either we agree this funding today to be rolled over for a year, or at the very least we agree that they make applications and be given the time to make applications to all the area committees based on the percentage of users that they have this year. Because if we don't do that, the reality is this funding to this organisation is going to be cut.
Mr. Hay, do you want to address some of those points?
Thanks, Leader. Yeah, just to follow on from Councillor Geddes's point, I think there are a number of examples where organisations that feel they deliver services provision across a number of areas have applied to multiple area committees, and that information will be presented to each individual specific to that part of the project, and it will be up to the organisation through the application process to convince that area committee that the impact on their area committee is sufficient to warrant the funding being released. So there's a well-trodden track there that is already established that if organisations want to apply to more than one area committee, they're perfectly entitled to do so, and they will be given the full support of the relevant officers to take that approach forward. Thanks, Leader.
Councillor McComb.
Thanks, Chair. I feel that what Councillor Geddes has just said offers a way forward here. That there are 3 other area committees to which application could be made. I would also agree with Councillor Dick's earlier statement about 3.3. I'm very concerned indeed about the wording there about the social work services priorities. I would have thought that improving access and accessibility for disabled people must rate as one of their priorities.
Councillor Geddes.
Well, can I say, sir, for the record, that I was not being critical of the organisation under any way, shape or form. When I think I said, if memory serves me correctly, I was intrigued that they had not made an application. Irrespective, don't let's waste time on that, but I was not being critical. I think, going back to the point that Councillor Smith has made, that let's continue this and ask or urge the organisation, in fact, to make the relevant applications to the other 3 area committees with a view, in fact, to getting this matter resolved in an equitable fashion. And I think that, you know, if we can do that for this year, sir, I go back to what Councillor Dick has already said. I would like to see this looked at and the possibility of rolling out a regional-wide service. But I repeat, and make no apologies, Leader, for doing so, to me, it's fair and just and equitable if, in fact, people from the other 3 districts are benefiting from this service in our regional capital. The respective area committees should, in fact, be looking at that in a positive positive fashion. And I'll be prepared to move that.
Councillor Crothers.
Thanks, Leader. I thank Councillor Geddes first for coming up with that. What I see as a solution. The only question that's left in my mind is it's been alluded to that there will not be enough money, certainly in this deal, if all the money is awarded to the what's been asked for. Is that if it's 100% allocation it's been awarded to, and would that be the same? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't have the facts that have been spoken about earlier, but if it was 100% allocation, but obviously they get scored to a certain percentage as they come through, I don't know if would there potentially be money left in area committees to fund something of this scale.
Thanks, Leader. Certainly, each area committee has got its own established set of criteria which reflects the priorities in the respective area committee remit. Any application, including this one, if it was submitted for area committee consideration, would have to go through that scoring process. And I guess if that is the route that members are so minded to take this morning, to recommend that as a route, I guess time is of the essence that the sooner an application is in with the relevant officer support and process, the sooner the respective area committees can consider that. So it's impossible for me to predict this morning what the outcome of any other area committee application would be, but what I can assure members is it would have to follow the consistent route that all applications need to take, regardless of the nature of what the projects or the applications are.
Okay, thanks so much for that clarity, Leader. Now, if that was a motion by Councillor Geddes, I'd be happy to second that.
Councillor Geddes.
Well, can I suggest, sir, and it's wiser heads than mine, I'm going to be honest and say that are suggesting a form of words in relation to 2.1, that the Dumfries and Galloway Care Trust are directed to all 4 area committees on a percentage basis as set out in table 1, sir, on page 140 of the minutes, for core funding for financial year 2013-14, together with other relevant external funding bodies.
I made the point several times, and people seem to ignore it, that Table 1 is not accurate. Table 1 includes 4% for Dalbeattie in the Nistale allocation, which takes it to 61%. So 4% of registered users are from Dalbeattie, and that is not in Nistale, it's in the Stewartship. So the table does need to be, I mean, you know, we can have a debate here as to whether the report's competent, because the figures are wrong, but the table's inaccurate. So it's 57% for Nistale and 17% for Stewartship, based on Dalbeattie being in the correct area.
Councillor Geddes.
Well, sir, I would have no problems in accepting the principle of that. I think at the end of the day, in fact, if the table, if it can be clearly demonstrated that that table isn't accurate, I think we should take the necessary remedial action to ensure that it is accurate. And I would suggest, in fact, that we operate on the basis of the revised table as I've just indicated. I think, again, sir, I think that's fair and equitable. You're providing, we're endeavouring to provide the retention of a service this year for a disadvantaged group of people. That shouldn't be lost sight of.
Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Chair. I do have, it seems like a way forward, but what's worrying me is the length of time before the Care Trust funding, lapses. I think it's April. Is it April? The renewal of the funding should start. It's April, 1st April. It should start. So it doesn't give them much time to actually get applications in for that type of funding. Another thing, if they don't get that funding, I think there's a 6-month lease that the council would have to pay for the shop mobility rent at the Lorburn Centre. If it's there, they have a lease till 2014, I think it is, but they've got to give 6 months' notice, and they wouldn't have that money for so I think the council would then be liable, if I'm correct.
Right. Councillor Carson.
Thank you. I'm in full agreement with what's been said before with the additional recommendation. I don't think we need to be so prescriptive as to go by percentages. Again, I think it's at the discretion of the the local area committees to decide which value there is in the service to their constituents. And it may be that councillors in the Stewardship decide that their contribution should be greater than 13% because they perceive the benefit of the service is greater than that. I don't think we need to be prescriptive. I have no problem in taking on board that the Stewardship Area Committee could certainly make a decision in a timely manner when we can do it when it comes down to building paths and whatever. So I don't think the time issue is critical in this instance. We've also got to, I think it was mentioned that there was 70,000 reserves. So I don't think we're looking at bankrupting or putting short mobility out of business in the short term.
Councillor Maitland.
Thank you very much. I've listened to everybody. I don't think I'm changing my mind. Social work does not consider this a priority to commission it. Nithsdale is the majority benefiting area, both in terms of people based and registered there and businesses benefiting from economic activity there. There is no reason at all why any organisation should not apply to any other area. They are free to do it, and then it is up to us to decide, as Councillor Carson said. So I'm perfectly prepared to continue on, and I don't know whether I will receive backing, but I'm continuing on with whatever it is, motion or amendment. I've moved the recommendations as they stand.
Councillor McClung.
Yeah, I would just like to echo the thoughts of Councillor Geddes and Carson. However, can it just be clarified, Councillor Nicholson was saying the urgency of the funding. At 3.2, it says the previous funding has been in 2 instalments. Is that correct? So this deal application could be considered for April and the other area committees could come in later on?
Thanks, Leader. I can confirm that all organisations that were in receipt of regional grants this financial year were subject to a contract, and the funding was released in either 2 or 3 tranches throughout this financial year on condition that the outcomes, etc., were successfully delivered that were outlined in that contract.
Councillor Dick.
Yeah, first of all, could I just ask the Councillor Geddes and Carson in regards to the alterations, the recommendations, if they'd accept one that he recommends that the council provides the organisation with help to spread its operations out throughout the region. And could I also actually get clarification on 2.2 in the recommendations, funding totaling 75,500? What exactly does that recommendation mean?
Leader, members may recall that when there was a report in front of this committee on the 4th of December last year to look at the whole principle of strategic commissioning, the members agreed that rather than continue to provide grants on an ongoing basis, that a number of organisations would get grants rolled over for 1 more year only, and thereafter the services that were deemed to be a priority of our council would be commissioned. What was suggested to members also at that meeting was that a small amount, i.e. the 75k, would be ring-fenced to enhance the commissioning process as and when it was felt appropriate. Exactly how that funding would be used would come back to this committee prior to it being committed. So officers would come back to P&R committee to say, we consider that some of this budget should be used in the following way to enhance the wider commissioning process.
Right. Mr. Haswell, I believe we have a motion amendment and a counter amendment.
Certainly my understanding.
Just in a response to Councillor Dick's question, yes, I would have no difficulties whatsoever with that. Indeed, I did refer to it that I would hope, in fact, we'd be able to move towards a region-wide service. So I have no difficulties with that. I presume that Councillor Carson would be, or I would hope he'd be of a like mind.
It was Councillor Crothers who was the seconder, sir.
Crothers, my apologies, forgive me.
Right, Mr. Haswell, I believe we have a motion, amendment, counter amendment.
Thank you, sir. I'll start at the top. The motion rests with Councillor Maitland, seconded by Councillor McGregor, and that is to the effect that the recommendations detailed at 2.1 and 2.2 in the report are adopted. The amendment is by Councillor Smith, seconded, I think, by Councillor Lever, and that is to the effect that the funding application from the Dumfries and Galloway Care Trust Shop Mobility be granted and rolled over for one further financial year with funding from this committee to enable the organisation to determine and provide information on the users of their service from across Dumfries and Galloway. Is that correct, sir? Thank you. The amendment by Councillor Geddes, seconded by Councillor Crothers, is to the effect that paragraph 2.1, the Dumfries and Galloway Care Trust Shop Mobility is directed to all 4 area committees and other external funding bodies for core funding for financial year 2013-14. I think, Councillor Geddes, you removed the words on a percentage basis at the request of your seconder. Is that correct?
That 2 issues, Leader. Yes, there's that. Based on the table 1 as amended, and the second one, sir, is also to include the possibility of the council working with the organisation to provide a regional-wide service in the future. Thank you.
I was going to come to that, sir. Can I go back to Councillor Geddes? You're suggesting that the funding be allocated on the percentage basis as amended, and that's acceptable to your seconder. Thank you. So the counter amendment is the Care Trust is directed to all 4 area committees on for core funding on a percentage basis based on the table at table 1 as amended. The word 61 becomes 57 under this scale for core funding together with other external funding bodies for financial year 2013-14. Is that correct, sir? Thank you. There is an addition that Councillor Geddes mentioned, and that is that the organisation be encouraged to seek assistance to extend its operations across Dumfries and Galloway.
Yeah, that's the thrust of it, sir. But Councillor Dick, used the words that in fact that the council, work with the organisation. I think that's a bit more positive, if you don't mind me saying so, Leader. Work, rather than sort of leaving it, as it were, to the organisation. Councillor Dick indicated, and I agree and support it, the council would work with the organisation to explore the possibility, as it were, of extending the service throughout Dumfries and Galloway.
I think the word explore helps because it wasn't put in. They might not want to expand. The explore, that should cover the point.
And I think just a small point that the 4% from the 61 is applied to Stuartry. Moves across.
Are you ready to proceed to a vote, Leader? In accordance with standing orders, the counter amendment is voted against the amendment in the first instance. So can I remind members you're voting for Councillor Geddes' counter amendment and for Councillor Smith's amendment. Leader. Deputy Leader. Councillor Crothers.
Counter amendment.
Councillor Carson.
Counter amendment.
Councillor Dick.
Counter amendment.
Councillor Dyte is not present. Councillor Geddes. Councillor Lever. Councillor McGregor.
Abstain.
Councillor Maitland.
Counter amendment.
Councillor McCaughtrey. Councillor McClung.
Counter amendment.
Councillor McComb.
Counter amendment.
Councillor Nicholson.
Amendment.
Councillor Nicholl.
Counter amendment.
Councillor Smith. The counter amendment is carried by 10 votes to 4 with 1 abstention. So the counter amendment is carried. Leader, can I remind members that you will now vote the counter amendment against the motion. The counter amendment is with Councillor Geddes. The motion is with Councillor Maitland. Leader. Deputy Leader. Councillor Crothers.
Counter amendment.
Councillor Carson.
Abstain.
Councillor Dick.
Counter amendment.
Councillor Dyke. Not present. Councillor Geddes. Councillor Lever.
Counter amendment.
Councillor McGregor.
Motion.
Councillor Maitland.
Motion.
Councillor McCaughtrey. Councillor McClung.
Counter amendment.
Councillor McComb.
Counter amendment.
Councillor Nicholson.
Counter amendment.
Councillor Nicholl. Councillor Smith. Counter amendment is carried by 11 votes to 3 with 1 abstention.
I have no further business. Can I thank you all